Oh no, they're falling. Today, we're going to do a wrap-up for the Black Author Readathon Romance Edition that I participated in the month of February. I read like 25 books specifically for this challenge. I read quite a lot! Here is what the bingo board looked like before I ended up filling it out, and then you can see how it looked in the end. Not all of the books that I ended up reading for this challenge actually worked for the bingo board, but I will kind of let you know what positions they worked for and things like that. Because this is the Black Author Readathon, all of the books are created by Black authors, and I had quite a fun time with this Readathon challenge that I ended up participating in. I will have links to all of the hosts along with their social media information down in the description box if you're interested in learning more about everybody who kind of put this together, along with the announcement for this particular challenge. I had a ton of fun and hope to do something like this again next year. All right, so on to the book. So the first one was Bingo Love Jackpot Edition by T. Franklin. This book ended up working for the prompts: graphic novel, forbidden and taboo romance, a mature romance, second chance, childhood to grown, friends to lovers, and historical, as it was taken place in the 50s. This is a lesbian romance and it's really sweet and adorable. Next up, I have Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan, and this works for the prompts of sports romance, a forbidden or dark romance, mature romance, single parent, second chance, friend group series, possibly. I'm not actually sure about that, but I know that this is part of a series. I think it's the different players on the team, so some of his friends, so I think so. And definitely suspense. This one is definitely a heavy hitter and has a lot of trigger warnings if you're interested in it. Then I ended up reading A Duke, the Lady, and a Baby by Vanessa Riley. This ended up working for historical, single parent suspense, sort of, and interracial, I believe. Then I picked up The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon, and this one works for contemporary and interracial. A Blade So Black by L.L. McKinney, and this one worked for fantasy and age gap, possibly interracial as well. Maybe. I will say this one was a stretch because although there is a hint at a romance in it, it doesn't really develop in this book. It looks like we'll get more of that in the later parts of the series, so it's not exactly clear who the romance is going to end up being in the end. So this one I ended up not using because I just wasn't sure. Then we have Make a Scene by Mimi Grace, and this ended up working for fake dating and possibly sports romance because the main guy love interest does work at a boxing gym, and that's kind of a stretch, but definitely good for fake dating. Then we have Trust Falling for You by Cherish Reed, and this one worked for a novella, a workplace romance, possibly enemies to lovers, and maybe realistic contemporary. I think several of these really work for realistic contemporary that I didn't necessarily mark down, but some of the ones that felt a little bit more on the nose I did put. Then we have Grip by Kennedy Ryan. This is the second in a series, and this is a rock star romance, a friends to lovers, a workplace romance, as she, I think, is his like producer or something. Then second chance, an interracial romance, that's definitely a big part of this, and suspense, which comes a little bit later in the story. So then we have Ties That Tether by Jane Icaro, and this one works for interracial romance. It's a big part of this. Second chance, sort of, that might be a stretch. Realistic contemporary and an age gap romance, as there is a 6-year gap between the characters. Then we have The Wedding Party by Jasmine Gulleroy. This one works, I believe, for friend group series. This is later in the series, and I haven't read multiple books from it, but I think it's kind of the different characters from the friend group, possibly. And then this is also supposed to be enemies to lovers. I don't think this did a good job with that, personally. It kind of just seemed like two characters who had one sort of negative encounter and then didn't really interact with each other after that. This also, which doesn't fit the prompts for this challenge, does have a secret relationship thing kind of going on, which I thought would be interesting to share if that's what you're into. Then we have The Worst Best Man by Mia Sosa, and this one ended up working for enemies to lover, interracial relationships, and workplace. Next up, we have The Boyfriend Project by Farah Roshan, and this one works for workplace romance and possibly mature romance, as I do believe the characters are in their mid-30s, possibly. Then we have Forbidden by Beverly Jenkins, which basically only really worked for historical romance. I couldn't really think of what else it fit in the prompts. It's not interracial because although he is white passing, he is technically a black character along with our main character. Then next up, we have my first Kindle read of the month, and that was Grading Curves. And this one works for forbidden or taboo romance. Age gap, this one I believe is a 7-year age gap. Mature, as one of the characters is in their 30s, and interracial. Also erotic, so keep that in mind. It is a very steamy book. Then we have Opposite of Always by Justin A. Reynolds, and this one works for second chances and fantasy. Next up, we have my first ever ARC. It was a advanced reader copy audio book for Excuse Me While I Ugly Cry. This one is definitely kind of a contemporary-ish romance, YA, and it's borderline enemies to lovers / friends to lovers. Through the process, it seems like they kind of become friends and then sort of catch feelings for each other. I think maybe of the two, it's supposed to be more enemies to lovers. It doesn't really feel strong on either front, but that's kind of where we're at with that. Then we have Check Please by Ngozi Ukazu, and this one fits for the graphic novel romance and the sports romance. This one is another one that's sort of a stretch, but not as much as the last one. This one, the romance basically isn't super featured in this volume. It kind of gets hinted at towards the very end, but you don't get to see too much of it here. I think the second volume is going to be a little bit more heavy on the romance, but I felt like this one was at least clear enough that I could say that it was romance. Next up, we have Insatiable Hunger by Yahara St. John. This one ended up working for childhood to grown, friends to lovers, and interracial. Then we have Colton 911 Agent by Her Side by Deborah Fletcher Mello, and this book ended up working for romantic suspense, single parent romance, mature possibly, and workplace romance, as they are both working on the same case. Then we have Once Ghosted, Twice Shy by Alyssa Cole, which I also ended up reading for the Sapphic Readathon, female and female romance, and this one also worked for the Black Author Readathon for the novella prompt and the second chance prompt. Then we had Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This one ended up working for interracial, contemporary, possibly mature. I could be wrong with that. It's possible that they're just in their late 20s and not really past 30s. I don't know for sure. And possibly a sort of friends to lovers situation, although that one's kind of a stretch as well. But it seems like they kind of become friends in the process of falling for each other, so That's a stretch. Then another book I ended up reading for the Sapphic Readathon in hopes that I could use it for this challenge as well was You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. And this one ended up working for friends to lovers, maybe. Realistic, contemporary, and I believe interracial romance. Then we have A Song of Wraiths and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown, and this ends up working for fantasy, suspense, enemies to lovers, for sure, forbidden, taboo, dark romance. And I ended up picking forbidden because the two characters are kind of destined to kill each other. So I feel like it could be considered forbidden or dark, but that could possibly be a stretch. The enemies part is also pretty clear because of that destiny and not so much because they necessarily hate each other. Then I ended up reading Nubia Real One by L.L. McKinney, which is a graphic superhero novel, which was pretty fantastic. And this one works for graphic novel and fantasy. The romance itself, although I absolutely loved it, it was super cute, I don't really think fit for any of the other prompts. And then the last book that I read before completing out my blackout was Real Men Knit by Quanah Jackson. And this one ends up working with friends to lovers, childhood to grown folks, and workplace romance. All right, so that pretty much wraps up all of the books that I ended up reading specifically for this challenge. I did read more than this in February. It was quite a crazy month for me. So if you wanna see a little bit more in depth about my reading stats and how I felt about books and things like that, do check out my February wrap up. And for a deep dive into my thoughts, definitely check out my reading vlogs. I will have those linked and listed down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to thumbs up, leave this emoji in the comments section down below to let me know that you made it this far and to help the channel. And yeah, thanks again to everybody who helped put together this readathon. I hope you found some Black romance authors that you are interested in, and I hope you check some of these out because there were some gems among all of them. That's pretty much it. I hope you enjoy, and I will see you in the next video. Until next time, bye!